Okay, we are good to go. Top 10 challenges for a token launch. And we have on stage Marina from the European Crypto Initiative, Dimi from Outlier Ventures, and Robert from 1KX. I guess we should start with a brief introduction. Say some words about yourself. Marina, would you like to start?
Thank you, Angela, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Marina, and I'm a co-founder of the European Crypto Initiative, which is a non-profit. It's an advocacy group. We talk to regulators in Brussels. We do send documents, feedback on all the crypto assets regulation. And it's pretty interesting to discuss also the token launch because it's, as you know, regulated in MiCA. But even previous to that, I did work with projects on similar things. And previous to crypto, I did work in crowd investing. I co-founded a crowd investing platform. So I'm even bringing the knowledge from then.
Hey everyone, I'm Dimi from Outlier Ventures. Outlier Ventures is the leading global Web3 accelerator and investor. We are around since 2014. Myself, I'm heading the token economies and NFT team at Outlier. We are 9 experts. We're basically the experts working day in and out with founders. We're covering the 4 major functions: token design, token engineering, DAOs and governance design, and NFT strategy. My background is in aerospace engineering. I spent some while after studies acting as a bridge between trade finance and the industry, tokenizing, turning industrial goods into digital assets, and then I moved over into the accelerator to Outlier Ventures.
Okay, yeah. I'm Robert. My background maybe start this way, data science, math, finance, went through TradFi, consulting, you know, the typical path. At one time even had a startup. And then, ended up as a contributor to various DeFi DAOs and also mainly as a researcher for 1KX, where, I oversee basically all things token. Obviously, like 1KX, who doesn't know, we're early stage VC fund, so the token launch is like a core topic of our work. And that's why I'm here, I guess.
Cool, great. And let's directly dive into why token launch. Jimmy, what are the typical reasons you see for a token launch?
Yeah, good question. The why is a good question. So usually there are a couple of. So one major one is obviously fundraising. Now we can debate, is this a good strategy to launch your token in order to fundraise? Now with the recent SEC actions, maybe this is a new path again. But there are further reasons to do so. Maybe you need to activate your community. You need to launch your product. Maybe you're running an infrastructure and where the token is a crucial part and the fuel of your network that you need basically in order to be using the network. Or you might be basically needing to reward and attract your first movers to the product, and you try basically to design a token launch in order to get your first customer stakeholders on board.
And do you see typical mistakes to avoid in this very first step, considering a token launch?
Well, I'm not sure about mistakes, but I think what's important here ties to the general token design phase, where it's really important that you use first principle thinking, so clear objectives, right? The one-on-one on token engineering, like what is it what you're trying to achieve? And obviously this sounds very simple, but first you really want to be specific, right? Have a specific objective. Full decentralization, fast growth, this is rather unspecific. And second, your protocol evolves in phases. So, right, think about bootstrap, growth, maturity. So probably also your objectives change through these phases. So you want to think about that as well. So this exercise, you want to plan ahead. And then third, there's also the part around, right, when you think about, you can't have like plenty of them. You should limit your objectives, obviously, right? So let's say it's Mach 3. So a nice exercise for your teams maybe, go to your BD person, to your product person, to your developer, anybody in the team, and ask them about their top objectives for the protocol, what you're trying to achieve, and maybe this supported by the token. And I guess then the specific ones per phase, right? And when you be able to aggregate that, right? And you still think it's simple, I guess then we can probably move on with the next challenge. But I think this is the part where I feel like it's super important, but also quite hard.
Yeah, and have you seen cases? Have you had ever a case where a team was postponing a token launch and decided to not launch now, and why?
Oh yes, I mean there's always a case where it's often tied to product related issues, but then every now and then, market. I guess we get to the timing question as well, but for sure it's better to launch right than just rush into it and then realize. Trent just showed really good examples what can go wrong if you may rush things. Not that Trent rush things, but it's just like these things will happen. So better safe than sorry, I guess.
Okay, and let's go over the different variants of a token launch. Just what options would a startup or could a startup consider when launching a tokens? Could you give us an overview, Dimi?
Yeah. There are a lot of options basically, especially now with the on-chain products existing. You have multiple ways to do so. So you can decide basically to launch on a centralized exchange, either do a sale on a centralized exchange on their launchpad venues, or you do an order book a sale basically together with a market maker. Then we have the on-chain options. There are different kind of ways. Other existing launchpads, products that provide like auctions, or even a launch on a decentralized exchange. You bootstrap a pool and you allow people to buy in. Or actually you don't sale, but you basically airdrop tokens to your community that used before a product, and you design basically different options on how you do the airdrop in order to achieve also stickiness.
I remember conversations with teams planning for a token sale and say, we are planning for do this in 6 weeks. How much time would you recommend a team to prepare and get ready for a token sale, a token launch?
It's a pretty broad question. It depends on the readiness of the product. I would say in the previous cycle we saw even token launches without having even a proper product and traction and product market fit built. I believe now with the next cycle we are seeing more sophisticated understanding of the markets, of the crypto market. Also the community is expecting basically products to have launched before any token is being launched. Readiness on the legal side, on the marketing side, there are a lot of factors here, but I would say you should plan 3 to 6 months, like that's really broad, but requiring here that the product is already developed in the last stages, maybe even launched and already built out first traction, people already using it, and then to focus only basically on your marketing efforts, finalizing the legal actions and requirements, and then speaking to market makers, exchanges, and the launchpads.
All right. So in a nutshell, don't do product development and token launch all at the same time. Is this something you would recommend?
Well, yes, you need to. We're in such a fast moving space that you probably cannot just say, I'm going to stop it now, I'm going to focus on something else. So, which means basically you either, or it's recommended to have one person minimum within a team that just focuses on everything token launch. And then we have also seen teams obviously then working with external agency advisories. They get also support from market makers. Some market makers have a lot of like new features and product offerings that they provide them. Marketing agencies or an accelerator like Outlier Ventures.
And once the token sale is defined, or a big part of the token sale is then token supply and token distribution. Because many times, even though it's hard to foresee how your product evolves and how much traction you gain, you sign up for a particular token distribution. So meaning unlock schemes, vesting schemes. What are the typical observations or challenges here, Robert?
lots of challenges. I think one, maybe I repeat myself, is again upfront in the design phase. That's why 3 to 6 months is also what I would totally agree with, is to know in which hands do you want to give your token, right? Because this should be the relevant stakeholders, supporters of your protocol. These are the guys that will move forward with you, on scaling up your protocol. And obviously you can't plan anything ahead. Again, referring to trend, the scammers will come. People will try to sneak away. But there are that's why you need to be very careful of which of these variety of tools you want to use, right? And I guess there's meanwhile lots of discussion of plain airdrops. Is it suitable or not? We had this discussion with all airdrops are farmed, things like that. So find a suitable way to address those. And when it comes to vesting and setting those schedules, I think there's it's also a little bit about, how quickly you want to get it out. One consideration that I hear mostly is obviously about token price volatility. And there's also great work. I guess 6 Month Venture, for example, they put something out where they kind of showed a couple of thousand token launches, and they said in hindsight it makes sense. Keep it small, right? Rather small unvests, weekly, but below 1%, and that helps stabilizing your price. But then also the team attribution, which kind of makes sense as well, right? When the token launches where team has more, investors have more, people that inherently have a longer horizon on their investment also help dampen the volatility. But again, then, this doesn't generalize well. It's really about you for your protocol. Make up your mind first. In this token design phase, what are your objectives? What are the groups of users you want to attract? And how do you think that works best? Maybe it is a long vesting schedule or something like that.
All right, and Dimi, you already mentioned legal considerations. Let's dig into that, Marina. Grab the mic. What are the most important topics projects should keep in mind when it comes to regulation and token launches?
How much time do we have? So I think things changed over the years for sure. I want to say that we do have crowdfunding regulation from very early, from 2014-15. So if you think about, in a way, token launches as a way of crowdfunding, I think maybe we can look into that. There's a regulation in the US, in the EU, etc. But recently, what I think happened was the MiCA, and that, at least in Europe, it's pretty interesting. That gives specific guidance just to the launch of tokens, so sales of tokens. And there are pretty good guidances there. They're pretty good rules, and I would say that they are very lean compared to what we could have. One is when you issue a token and then you want to sell it to the audience, like an open sale, you need to write a white paper. And that white paper is kind of much more specific than the ones that we usually wrote. There's legal questions there. There's also a way how, for example, you need to calculate your energy consumption of your project. So you need to include that in. You need to include your management, your governance of your organizations, etc. So this is, I would say, doable, especially because this white paper needs to be sent to the National Competent Authority, but just as a notification. So you don't need to wait for them to confirm your white paper. You just send it to the National Competent Authority. They're notified that you're going to do the sale, and then you can do the sale. So this is something that is that's going to be applicable in 2025, at the beginning of 2025. So whoever would like to do token sale at that time will need to follow these rules for the European Union market. And so that's, I think, maybe a thing that is important right now. It's going to be more and more important in the future, is that new regulations are coming, or they are here already in Europe, and they're going to, in a way, force fragmentation within different jurisdictions. So if we would like to do something that is a little bit more global, which is something that, of course, blockchain and crypto is. It was global from the beginning. I think now it's going to be a little bit harder to do it, or at least you will need to be mindful of the most important jurisdictions. I think all the latest token sales for sure have observed those rules. I think the terms and conditions, all the contracts that you need to sign and look into that, they've been upgraded year by year. But right now, the European Union has really the first framework that is very concrete just on token launch. We don't know what will happen in the other jurisdictions. From our understanding, we will not, at least in the next few years, have new rules, let's say, when it comes to the US. But as you know, also, there was a current Ripple case, and the crypto Twitter went quite crazy, especially when it comes to token launches, and the idea is that that could basically open the door to new token launches. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. I cannot comment that much on the US perspective, but I would say that Europe is definitely going to have a very clear framework on how to do your token launch and offer it to the members, citizens of the European Union.
You didn't mention decentralization here. I just wonder, because for the SEC, this was kind of not being considered as a security due to decentralization was, I would say, a main driver for so many DAOs to see how they can prove decentralization. What does the EU say about it? Does it matter?
So the EU doesn't say anything about decentralization. There's one article in MiCA that basically says that the projects that are decentralized are out of scope, so they are not regulated, but they need to be fully decentralized, not partially decentralized. So there shouldn't be any intermediaries within that project. This is still an open term. We don't know what decentralization means. There's not been any kind of, I would say, open debate or even a paper or anyone describing what would that mean. And I would say that this is also the work that we need to do as a community, but also as our organization, to talk to mostly European Securities Market Agency. That is the one that is right now doing the technical work after MiCA. So the more specific things that need to be still cleared before MiCA is going to be applicable. And I can say that I would think that the regulators, at least in Europe, they are very conservative when it comes to decentralization. So whatever we think decentralization is, they think it should, be even more decentralized. So like the criteria is really, really high. And I think that, we need to keep that in mind. But at the same time, I don't want to, be very negative for the future. There's many things that we need to keep in mind if we are a project that is not in a way focused in Europe. For example, there's still this thing that is called reverse solicitation, which is quite complex, but it basically says that if you're not addressing a specific market, in a way you don't need to be regulated there. You shouldn't, for example, address the European Union citizens, you shouldn't market to them, you shouldn't write or use any of the European Union languages like German or French. You shouldn't probably sponsor events, etc. So then whoever comes from the European Union to your project, it can be seen as a reverse solicitation, which means I somehow found you, and I can still use mostly, in most cases, your services, maybe buy your token, but you didn't come to me and address me. So the regulations are really, in a way, I would say regulating the markets, not the global.
Which, sounds similar to the SEC decision on, it's not the token itself, it is the security, it's rather how you market and sell it that might be, lead to this security.
Maybe one very important thing here. MiCA does talk about crypto assets, and MiCA does regulate crypto asset, which is a completely new asset that never existed before legally. So it's a completely new term. Bitcoin actually made it to us changing laws and bringing new terminology to the European Union. which means that those crypto assets are not securities. If they are securities or financial instruments, they're regulated somewhere else. We know MiFID and MiFIR and other regulations. So MiCA is really just regulating non-securities, and they can be utility tokens. They can also be stablecoins. Stablecoins are seen as not being securities in Europe, and I think that's pretty important. But of course, we need to go case by case and look into every specific function of each token.
Okay, a lot of food for thoughts, and I guess still no clear, black and white, rather a lot of gray zone. Let's think for a moment about this decentralization aspect. It looks like it still matters in the future, but maybe not for a token launch immediately, at least in Europe. Okay, there are many jurisdictions. Take this with a grain of salt, but this aspect of it matters for how you are considered legally. Decentralization matters, and this brought a lot of projects to think about, okay, how can we decentralize? Now, from your perspective, Robert, what would be your recommendation? What's important to think about when it comes to decentralization and tokens?
So yeah, it's for sure something you want to think very, like everything, hard about, because yes, there's this advantage, and I guess everybody in this room is like, yeah, decentralization, this is the way to go, right? This is also our thesis that you want to get there. It's a timing question, right? It's a little bit the thing about, because it's really good, you get legal benefits probably, but as any good thing, there's also the other side, and this is something to consider. Use a protocol, you start as a business, and there is cost attached to decentralization, right? When you think about infrastructure protocols, when you have like a centralized infrastructure like storage compute, you have one DevOps person. When you decentralize it to 20,000 nodes, might be 20,000, but your protocol still needs to fund those somehow, right? So you lose economies of scale, basically. This is just like one example of those considerations. I think, again, sorry, Trent, that I always refer to your presentation, but it also raised the point, right? Governance is something when you're like, yes, you can bring it out in the wild and have a community who drives it and brings a lot of good value, but it's also like an overhead, right? Like it's something that, you can't at one point not control who's coming in. You open the whole governance attack surface. And that's why you really want to think careful of like, okay, all the good things I get versus the potential drawdowns, when do I make the switch? And typically, when we discuss with protocols, it's like this more, gradual, progressive decentralization way to say, okay, let's go step by step, open up, each new attack surface, so to speak, step by step. Because that seems more rational than, open the gates and see what happens.
Anything to add, Dimi?
Yeah, maybe to add also infrastructure with running validators is one aspect. If we think from a token launch perspective, the decentralization aspect, it's a matter here. The token launch is the initial distribution of the token. So you might activate their decentralization effort by, airdropping to your users, but are they the real users that will stick, or are they just the farmers that think of basically gaining profits out of it? And I think when we launch tokens, we shouldn't just think of the initial token launch, but from the continuous distribution of the token. And also built in not only like, okay, I'm gonna airdrop it now and they can sell, and we saw with Uniswap, Arbitrum, like a really big amount of users, token holders sold their assets. I think it was like 30, 40, 50%. But to build in then factors, to build in requirements to basically hold your tokens or being even locked, and then get further rewarded and further use the product in order to really say there is a stickiness, these are the real users, this is really decentralized and not just based on the initial distribution.
Right, makes a lot of sense. And also on my comment, I do see, I mean, decentralization is such a huge potential. I guess all I want to say is maybe it should not only be driven by legal considerations and rush into it, because there are also challenges that come with decentralization. Now, I'd like to discuss. Okay, token launch is not your final step in token design. How to get ready or how to be prepared as a team for the time after token launch?
After the token is being okay. I mean, obviously the team will need to further continue focus on the product, and depending on where we are on the market cycle, especially when we are in the craziness of the bull market, there might be a quick distraction because people will speak about prices and so on. So you need to focus on your product, but start basically building in and leveraging your token, like give it utilities, allow people basically to stake, to be active, progressive decentralization in form of governance, maybe have a delegation layer, because people might not be, can be like a day in and out on forums, on governance forums, but to allow to delegate. So you need to basically further care about your community, as well as start analyzing your on-chain data. And start basically reading the activities with the product and with the token, and based on these take measures, especially when you continue to distribute your token, adapt the rewards. It's not just do it once and then I can't adapt it anymore. So keep the flexibility open.
And I remember, Robert, you once said tokens are catalysts to anything in your ecosystem, to the big potential, the positive sides as well as the negative sides.
Oh, hi. Sounds like me. So yeah, right. It comes back to what we had in the beginning, right? Like, what do you want to try achieve, and how can your token help achieving this? Which is a big question in the token design. And this is exactly what Dimi said. Like, you want to have a plan. Like, once a token is out, how can new unlocks and token features, staking, delegation, but also new product features, right? How can they spin off this flywheel of your protocol to grow, and also like in a sustainable way, right? Because with the bear market, we now see that it's not always going up, and this is the crucial piece. You should plan before you launch the token for these phases. They will come, bad times will always come. What will happen, what can happen there, and that's why it's so crucial to also understand, like, okay, who are the ones that we want to stick with us, and this is like why you want them to give the tokens in their hand with the distribution, with the right distribution tools as well.
And speaking of bear market, would you recommend to not launch now? How to get the right timing for a token launch?
Is there always the right timing? That's the question. But I would say don't get distracted. It's actually the best time to prepare now. To focus on your product, to launch already the product, find product market fit, the real users, the real believers in what you do. Try to prepare already for the next cycle, which will be upcoming. You could launch already now. The question is, is there a demand side? Because you want the demand side. And you do it once, like you only launch once a token. And if you don't do it right, it can even like impact the success of your product. And I think it's the right time to basically prepare, have everything ready, and not do it in like the pico bull, where you're gonna have just the crazy farmers and just the short-term thinkers.
Okay, so let's sum it up. What's in a nutshell your main recommendation, Marina, for a project to consider a token launch and a token sale?
Thank you. I would say that, as my co-panelist said, you need to prepare and take a lot of time also for the legal part, not only for the product part, which is essential, of course. And I think that it's really important to look into the future. Like, okay, this is the first step, as you said. What are the next steps? Like, what are the next steps of the progressive decentralization? What does it mean, like, from the legal side? Like, how are we decentralizing even operations? Like, all the, I don't know, collaborators that are there might be there from the beginning, and maybe something to add a little bit more complexity to what we discussed before. At least from the MiCA side, we do have two things mainly that it regulates. One is the token sales, but the other part is also service providers. So DeFi is excluded, and even if you're providing some service, or the community, the DAO is providing a service, if it's decentralized, is excluded from MiCA. And this is where decentralization is important, and we need to understand, like, what is the level that is still in a way acceptable for regulators. But looking in the future, because now, let's say it's bear market and maybe you can launch in a year or 2 years or something like that. In 2 to 3 years, we are going to discuss the DeFi regulation too. And we are in France right now. You probably have heard about the ACPR paper on DeFi, the EMF paper on DeFi. There's a lot of DeFi discussion that is happening already, and that one is talking about decentralization. And maybe if you have time, maybe during the summer, take a look at it. The interesting part is that they go into the technical part, and we all know about the layering. We know that layer ones and all the applications and how they kind of interact, and the regulators are learning about that, and they're also looking into this. And I think that, at least from, in a way, our organization point of view, and I think also the community kind of agrees, is that we definitely need to stay with at least the lowest layers as decentralized as possible, and in a way also as untouched by regulation as possible. So there was a lot of innovation could still come there, and then I think we can realistically expect that the, I would say, front ends and also the layers that are directly addressing maybe users, those are going to be the first ones that are going to be looked at, even if we talk about DeFi. Okay, Dimi.
Yeah, to sum it up, especially to the builders out there, don't feel overwhelmed. There are a lot of experts in this field that can support you. We have seen a lot, right? There are now a lot of cycles that we have seen already about tokens. And we might have listened not top 10 challenges today, but 30 plus. Just try to frame it into 4 questions. Why do I want to launch a token? What do I want to achieve, and what's the token about? When am I going to do it? And how, basically, what we discussed, the distribution.
Robert, you have the final word.
Oh, wow. I mean, this was already quite a good one. Maybe to add one piece that we just briefly touched, was also quite important in our opinion, is to, like, around your token launch, build up the excitement in the stakeholder groups that you want to attract, and then also like keep up the momentum over time, right? Not just like drop the token. And maybe we covered quite complicated topics, so I thought I'd bring something that's easy to understand. So everybody knows what that is. Okay, so let me explain how I see like this will help engage momentum. So, this is like the Kinder Surprise, and it's a perfect example for how you can excite kids, because they don't know what's in there. It's, making noise, and with any box, they already are excited when they hold it. And then they unwrap it, and it's chocolate. So boom, first excitement rush. It's similar to like 80% APY on your Pool 2. And then, obviously, we know what's happened after the sugar rush. So that's why there's a second egg in there. And there you have like a Lego figure or something to build. So something that keeps the kids busy, and then still, excited, right? And this is something where, this is just like a couple of steps, and I know you don't build protocols for kids and not for the real world. The two things you should really also take away is like, one, think about all the steps, how you can build up the momentum, how you can keep up those token enhanced features, but also that go hand in hand with product enhancement for your protocol, right? This is super important. And the second aspect, obviously, also always have in mind, is this the right incentive for the user group I want to attract? This is for kids, they are super happy with this. If you give this to a teenager, there's probably not so much excitement. And yeah, there might be even a third one. Always have an eye on the legal side, because actually these guys, these eggs are banned in the US as well. So yeah, with that.
Thank you so much, everyone.
This was the best closing ever.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks.